Hello guys, welcome to Centom, and for today's episode we'll be talking about the different varieties of Dieffenbachias that I have and how I take care and propagate them. Now this Dieffenbachia that you see right now is the first Dieffenbachia that we have in our house, and this is quite a common plant actually, but it is very beautiful, but it is underrated since it's, as I've said, it's very common. They are very easy to take care of and they survive anywhere. You could actually find them around our house because it tends to creep in different places and they can be evasive also. But nonetheless, this plant is very good for decorating your space because it provides a big amount of foliage, and when it comes to the soil, it is not very picky. You just have to use a garden soil, or if you want something fancy, you could give it a loam soil. And if you're going to put it in a pot, then you'll have to make sure that it has drainage so to avoid root rot. You could also use water and it will survive. You don't have to use soil. You could just place it in a jar with water, then it will develop roots there and you'll have no problem taking care of this plant. Now, to propagate this plant, you just have to simply cut them into pieces and just place them on the soil, and they will develop roots, and eventually it will show some leaves as well. Now this plant that is in front of you is called Singuini. It is very similar to tropic snow actually, but I believe that this is called Singuini, and it has a dark green and light green combination, and the patterns of this plant is quite consistent with every leaf that it produces, unlike the other Dieffenbachias, which can be random. Now this plant can tend to get very big, but you can create small ones also, a bushy type. I tried to create some of them like this one. This is quite small, and this one also. If you place them in a shady area, then it will lose its variegation. This one also, this is a propagation of the same plant. Now the next plant that we have here is the Dieffenbachia Tropic Crane, and it was sold to me as a camouflage because it does look like army camouflage, but the camouflage that I see online is quite lighter, and I found out that the name of this plant is Tropic Crane actually. And the difference, it is quite similar to Singuini, but the coloring of this lighter green is more of a medium color than the darker green is more darker. The shade of this one is very different from the Singuini, although it has similarity when it comes to blotches. Look at this one. This has a green, light green and dark green combination, while on this one it has a light green and dark green combination, but on a different distribution. See this one, this is darker and this is lighter, so this is more, this has a lot of variety when it comes to its print, unlike the Singuini, which is more consistent when it comes to its design or patterns. Now the next plant that we have here is called Tiki. This plant is more lighter and it produces white coloring. If you place it in a very bright place, it would produce more lighting, and it's quite similar to cookies and cream, but it was sold to me as Tiki. Right now it is color lime green, but it tends to turn white. And what I love about this leaf is that it's random. The design is very random and abstract, and it is very interesting. The growth of this plant is not that fast. I would say it's on a medium level. And since this is a very light colored plant, I would advise you to place it in a very bright but indirect place so you could get the most of its variegation. The next plant that we have here is called Camille. Sometimes they call this Marian, but I believe this is Camille because Marian has a lot of white. My only frustration with this plant is that it is quite a slow grower, unlike other Dieffenbachia, which is a fast grower. This one tends to be very slow. I have this plant for a couple of months now, and the size is still very small, so that's the only thing that I don't like about this plant. But nonetheless, it is still very beautiful. The next plant that we have here is called the Green Magic. This design is very minimal and elegant. This plant is very different from the rest of the Dieffenbachia because most Dieffenbachias are very showy, but this one has a very minimal pattern. It only has a white line on the middle, and this plant is quite slow when it comes to giving off leaves, unlike the other plants. The next plant that we have here is the Dieffenbachia rowers. What I like about this plant is that the design of the leaves can be so random. Like for instance, this one, it has a predominantly white color on the middle, then the rest of it is half moon, like this one, while this one is 1/4 white while 3/4 is green. So the thing about this plant is that you'll never know what will be the look of the next leaves would be like. And this plant, I bought this a couple of months ago, and it's quite leggy, so I chop it off. So this plant is actually the bottom cut. As you could see here, I cut it here, then it sprouted a leaf here, then it gave off all little babies here, while this one is the middle cut, the mid cut. I just cut a piece of its branch and stick it to the soil, and then it has a new plant. While this one is the top cut of the Dieffenbachia rowers, that's why the leaves here is quite big, because the top cut has the mature part of the plant. That's why this is different. The next plant that we have here is this Dieffenbachia danguensis. I believe it was sold to me as a variegated Dieffenbachia, and some people call it big ears, but when I did my research, I found out that the name of this plant is called danguensis. I believe and I feel that this is the most striking of all the Dieffenbachias because it looks so beautiful, and the patterns here are quite abstract, and you'll never know what will be the next pattern would look like. and it has different shades of green, from light green to dark green to yellow. And since it is a very light colored plant, you would have to put this in a very bright area but not direct sunlight because it would get burnt. But if you want to make the most of its variegation, then you have to place it in a very bright place. The only problem with this plant is that it is quite slow growing compared to the regular or common Dieffenbachias. And the last plant that we got here is Dieffenbachia maculata, and I got this plant from Baguio City, and it was sold to me as nameless, but when I did my research, I found out that the name is Maculata. This plant looks like a leopard print. Actually, Dieffenbachia is often called as leopard lily. And the size of this plant is quite small and bushy. It is good for tabletops and indoor decor. As you can see here, the leaves are quite small, or maybe it's because my plant is still very young, so I'm not too sure how big this plant could be. And it is very interesting when it comes to its pattern. It's quite random actually, but the saturation of the yellow is quite strong. See here, it has this African vibe when it's print here. And I noticed that some insect likes to live here. There are some spider that lives here. Probably this plant is attracting a lot of pests, so I need to put more insecticide with this plant. It is very uncommon for Dieffenbachia to have pests, but this one attracts a lot of pests. For some reason, it is attracting a lot of pests. Excuse me for that. So anyway, this is my last plant, and I hope you enjoyed my collection. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and see you at my next episode. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.